Exposition, an LMC Experience original podcast. Welcome to the Exposition podcast. I'm your host, Micah Accordion Sims, and I'm here with my co-host, T.
Hello.
And I'm here with a very special guest today, Dr. Luis Zuniga.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you guys for inviting me. I'm excited. Although I don't know what we're going to be talking about, but I think that's part of the fun, right?
It was totally part of the fun.
Okay, good.
All right, so first we want to talk about your experience. What got you into music?
What got me into music? I grew up listening to music in Panama. In Latin culture, and you could make an argument about every culture. Music is a, fundamental part of the culture, and it's no different in Latin America. So I grew up listening to music, playing music, whether it was, as a child playing the percussion instrument or singing, or, eventually when I got a little older, I started playing a little bit of piano. Then I got into playing flute, clarinet, saxophone, and it was kind of just like a thing that I did growing up. It wasn't like there wasn't any, there wasn't a moment of discovery for me with music. It was more like it was always part of my life. And then, I just kept doing it. And, as I was getting older and older, I think it was like 12, 13, by then I had made a decision that that's what I was going to do, as a professional. So that was kind of like, it was more like, I guess this is what I do. I do this well, and I'm just going to keep doing this. So
Where'd you go to school for music?
So my high school didn't have a music program, so I ended up having to go to my high school during the normal school hours, and then after school I would go to the conservatory in Panama, which is just a music school. And then after I graduated from high school, I came to the States. I went to Shoreline Community College up in Washington, Seattle. And then I did my undergrad at University of Miami in Florida. I did my master's at UCLA. I did another master's at Cal State LA. And then I did my doctorate at University of Colorado in Boulder.
Oh, that's pretty impressive.
Really impressive.
I just been around a little bit in the United States. So.
Alrighty, which leads us to our first question. How would you define music?
That's a tough question. It depends which day you ask me. That's a hard question. I would say, you can ask 100 musicians and you're going to get 100 different answers to that question, I think. But I think that at the personal level, I would define music as the way that we react or that we get influenced and affected by an artistic expression from an artist with the intent of, well, maybe not with the intent all the time, but with the purpose of creating some sort of beauty or emotions related to it. So that in a way is also a vague answer too, right? Because a lot of things can fit that category. But I think more than just the motion of making music, I think music is more about the reaction that you get as a listener. So, and also as a performer. I mean, like I said, that's just a loaded question. It's like, it just depends how you're seeing it, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard because, when you ask that to a musician, you start wondering, well, am I answering that question as a performer or as a listener or as a...
Both, maybe?
Both? Can I do one and not do the other? Can I be just a music listener and not being a performer that is not performing at that moment, it's very hard. It's hard to like unplug these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because, it's like you ask somebody, don't think about it as a college professor. It's like, well, I don't know if I can do that. Can you be something that you are not at a moment, right? It's like, I don't know. I don't know that that's possible. So, hard question. That's a hard question.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just about to give you a harder question. How about that?
Good.
What is good music?
Yeah. What is good music? I think, again, that's also such a personal question, right? Like, you ask somebody, just the other day in class, my philosophy of music class, we're talking about Britney Spears, right? And I made a comment about it, and somebody was like, oh, no, Britney Spears music is very good, and yada, yada, yada. And I started thinking, well, I mean, if you think that that's good music, I mean, I'm not going to tell you what good music is. It's not my call. Some people like Britney Spears, some people like Backstreet Boys, and I'm not picking on them. But I think, and I could be wrong about this, and it doesn't really matter if I'm right or wrong, but I think good music is something, or a, not something, but a particular style of music or a composition that has artistic merit. It's meaningful, and at the same time can endure the test of time. I think that's very telling of good music. Good music seems to have the ability to endure the test of time. When you think about Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, there has been hundreds of thousands of composers that came around that same time, but there's reasons why we keep listening to these same composers, not others. So, so time it's kind of like a good way to weed out music,
I think the question is less of like what is good music and what isn't bad, or what isn't like maybe not even bad, but subjectively speaking, like boring or less entertaining perhaps.
Yeah, but again, that's back to that same thing that I said initially, right? That's very personal, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I can't tell you what to listen to, right? It's like I don't know.
Like if you don't like Britney Spears and someone else does, then
Sure.
it might be good music to them, but
yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. But I'd be willing to bet any amount of money that in 200 years, probably people won't be listening to Britney Spears.
I can't
Can't
predict that one.
Oh no, you can definitely not say for sure. I mean, it's just even the young musicians that I talk to today in this day and age. If you make a reference, people don't know who she is.
Yeah,
it's true.
So that came and went and became, it was relevant at some point, and it's perhaps now not relevant in a very short period of time. So that tells you something, though.
It's very similar to like recently, like about like we see like modern day more contemporary music, like rappers like for instance Lil Pump, right? He comes and went. It's just with the trend, right?
Yeah, and then again, I'm not saying that it's meaningless. It's meaningful to somebody, but is it relevant? Is it really going to like change the course of music? Is it really going to like?
Is that meaning universal? I think is a
it could. Yeah, I mean. And who knows? The answer might be it is. Maybe somebody will be, so impacted by the music of these one-hit wonders or seasonal, stars that they say, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, and then suddenly they become very meaningful just because they were influenced by, a one-hit wonder or something like that. It's hard to tell. Obviously, all this is hypothetically speaking, right? So.
Alrighty. Here's it's like a really easy question for you to answer, okay?
Which I bet it won't be an easy question. But go ahead. I mean, since we're tackling the real questions of music.
What is the sexiest instrument to play?
Sexiest instrument.
In my personal opinion, now to watch it be played, no idea, haven't seen it. Cowbell though, what are our opinions on that?
I mean, cowbell is a fantastic instrument. You know, Latin music, it's not Latin music without cowbell. Cowbell is one of the primary musical instruments in Latin music. Its function is very defined and very important. I just don't. I think the harmonic spectrum that the cowbell present is not as vast and open.
Very short, yeah.
Yeah, it's very limited, and I'm not saying that it's bad. It's perfect for what it does. I'm particularly drawn to instruments like the cello. I think the cello is a beautiful instrument. It has to do with the range of the instrument. I think it's a beautiful instrument. The violin, when it's played right, it could be pretty amazing. But hey, again, it's part of what you grow listening, to, right? Like if you there's also an acquired taste to many instruments, right?
For sure.
Yeah, I don't think I could listen to much more than 15 minutes of the theremin. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got its value, right? But I don't think I could, listen to an hour of that. I think I will go mad. But, any instrument played at a very high level could be really, really appealing and beautiful, right? I mean, you hear, I'm not saying anything bad about oboe players, but oboe is a beautiful instrument when it's played right. But it takes such a level of mastery to achieve that level of beauty. Because when it's not played right, you're like, oh my God, somebody stepped on that duck. I mean, seriously. I mean, it's like, and no one likes to listening to that. No one does. No one can say, oh yeah, I like to listen to the dog that just got stepped on. It's like, nope.
Alrighty, here's a bit of a more difficult question. The word genius is thrown a lot around in music. How's the world lost its meaning in music and in this landscape of music? And do you think who do you think is truly a genius in music?
That's a good question. I never use that word. I rarely ever use that word. And you're right. I think we have gotten to the point that word gets thrown around very easily. I just heard somebody the other day call Kanye West a musical genius, and I don't have anything against Kanye West. I actually like his music, especially the early stuff. I don't think I will call him a genius, and I think that unfortunately people use that term very loosely. And yeah, I think that they have diminished the meaning of the word because it's just become a colloquial term that people use in music all the time. Like the word virtuoso, people use that word all the time to refer to somebody, with a high level of performance dexterity. And I think that word actually has lost some of its meaning too. Geniuses. Mozart, Beethoven, and that's more on the classical side, but I think that there are modern geniuses that we, tend to overlook. I would say somebody like Stevie Wonder, for example. Stevie Wonder, I mean, a modern genius, what would that look like? I don't know. But Lionel Messi is a genius for sure. So, I mean, they're out there.
Yeah.
Would you say like hip-hop artists like Kendrick Lamar would be considered a genius?
That is a tough one.
The other thing that I feel that we do in society is that we want to have these labels done pretty quickly. Like, I don't think I like Kendrick Lamar. I'm not gonna diminish anything from a great artist. I just think that we need to see how this plays out.
For sure.
And in this day and age, we try to be like the first one that labels somebody. Like, oh, so and so is a genius. Oh, I was the first one that came up with that. It's like, okay, great, right? So I don't know. I don't know if Kendrick Lamar would be. I mean, I hope for him he is. I don't. But I think that we throw that term too loosely now. And I think in society in general, we're kind of like very eager to discover who's the next one, and we want to be the ones that labeled it, or I discovered so and so. I'm like, sure, whatever, that's fine. But, yeah.
I think especially like with music being such a big thing, not only when it comes to like, you know, economy, the industry, stuff like that, but just in general, everyone likes music. So there's always going to be someone who wants to not only give the label, but, you know, get the label. So I feel like social media and how the industry uses it in that sense has also led to the usage of something like genius being thrown around a lot, especially in relation to people like Kanye West and Kendrick Lamar. There's a big hyper fixation on like who's the best, who's the smartest, who's made the biggest change, even though relatively speaking, especially for those two artists, it's been a couple of decades, which is pretty short in the long history of music.
No, that's just it, right? I mean, I go back and listen to some of my favorite music from the 70s, and I listen to Queen, and I think to myself, there's no way that Freddie Mercury is not considered a genius. I mean, this guy is probably the best singer of all times, of all styles of music. So, I mean, yeah, I don't, you know. But like I said, I made a comment about Lionel Messi, you know. It's like, I've seen enough of Messi to know that he's a genius, you know. Like, it's just incredible, you know. And I think that there's plenty of, you know, other examples out there of modern times geniuses that we just don't know that they are.
Because I feel like by the time you've seen enough to make that declaration, that person's either already gone or they're not. You know, they're past their prime at that point. Once you can make that kind of declaration, once you can definitively say like this body of work is, you know, the work of a genius, you've already, you know, it's got to be storied at that point. It's got to be long. It's got to be expansive.
Yeah, well, and I think that there is something about proven time, right? As well, you don't. I don't know. I will have to go back and review the history of geniuses, but I don't think that you're a genius just from one thing you do.
Yeah, exactly.
It's more like the extensiveness of your work.
For sure.
So that's an interesting thing. I haven't thought about that in a while, but yeah, I'll be curious to find out somebody like Beethoven. Like, I mean, people knew that he was an incredible composer when he was alive. He actually got a lot of recognition during his time, but I don't know that people were label him a genius when he was alive.
No, for sure.
So, yeah.
You want to ask your question?
I mean, remember what I wrote down.
It's number 4.
Oh, thank you. How knowledgeable do you feel on contemporary music, especially in more underground or indie scenes?
Do I consider myself how knowledgeable?
Yeah.
From 1 to 10, probably not very high. I will put myself pretty low on that. Yeah, maybe a 2.
I mean, any particular reason?
I don't think that I've spent enough time studying the art and the field to know or to feel competence to say, oh, you know, I know about this. Like, I mean, the world of music is so vast that if you ask me, like, well, which one is your favorite Balkan artist from former Yugoslavia? I'm like, I couldn't name you one, right?
And there's a couple that I know of, so
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So I couldn't, right? But if you ask me, like, okay, well, what's your favorite salsa band from the 70s, I can say, well, I grew up with that. So that I got pretty dialed in. Or if you ask me, like, what's your favorite salsa group from right now, and what's your expertise on salsa and current salsa music and how you see that, I could be like, from 1 to 10, I would say about a 9, right? So I think a lot of it has to do with what you are familiar with or what you spend most of your time working with.
Yeah.
Like if you ask me about Broadway musicals, I'll be like, no, I can give you about a 10 out of 10 on that. Because I do a lot of musicals, and I have been doing a lot of musicals in the last 10 years. But if you ask me about like current subculture, underculture bands that are out there, I couldn't even. I will have to pass and say, give me some time to do some research, and then I, until I feel comfortable having a deeper conversation about that.
Would you take suggestions?
Yeah. Would I get to them right away? Probably gonna go on a long queue of things that I have to listen to before I get to that.
For sure.
Because, conducting as many groups as I work on right now, I mean, that is my job, and that's what I have to do to prep for concerts and performances, that I'm always listening to new things, but I also have a long queue of things that I have to listen to, that I have to learn, that I have to prepare.
For sure.
So it's like, yeah, I'm always interested in new music and finding out about new trends and all of that. But, it's like everything, priorities, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Here's another really good question. So how do you feel about what's a more modern classical? Because you said that you're really into classical music, right? Modern classical, and it's kind of in a stagnant state at the moment where there's not much innovation going on. How do you feel about specifically like innovation in music going on, and how important is that to you?
Well, that's everything, because the things that don't evolve, they tend to die out. So I think that what we're seeing more and more often now is reaching this plateau in which we are actually starting to blur the lines of what is classical music and jazz music, and how is jazz influencing classical, and how classical is influencing jazz, and how electronic music is influencing classical, and how classical is influencing electronic. So we're starting to see these blends of music that are hard to put a label on. Like, well, is that classical? Oh, well, it's in the classical style, but there's a turntable, and there is a drummer playing beats, and there's a symphony orchestra behind it, and like what's his name? Kev Choice, for example. Kev Choice, that, Oakland artist, pianist, hip-hop writer, music director with Lauryn Hill, and last time I talked to him, he had premiered his piece of music with his hip-hop group with the Oakland Symphony, right? So it's like you start having these blends, like, is it hip-hop? Well, kind of. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not. I mean, it doesn't matter if it is or not. Sounds good. I want to see it, right? Yeah. Is it classical? Sure, or not. I mean, I'm sure there's some people that are snobs about each style of music. They'll be very, like, purist about it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you label it, right? So, but I think we're seeing more and more of these blends of styles, these hybrid styles that are coming up that are definitely parts of the industry that if they don't happen, I think that could be trouble for either side.
No, I think especially in relation to classical, I know I might have mentioned this album to you, Micah. This band Liturgy, they're a black metal band, but but a lot of their in between passages, their interludes are almost fully classical.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have like opera singing in the middle of it.
Oh,
so
cool.
you'll have this like 12-minute gargantuan track where it's just drums and guitar and screeching vocals, and then it'll cut entirely for 3 minutes and it'll just be a piano, some strings, and someone just singing into the background.
Nice.
And it's as you said, it's very much a hybrid, because I'd still call it black metal. It still
Correct.
follows all the formulas and all
Yeah.
that. But then you get to these interludes and you're like, well, this is obviously trying to do classical, trying to
Yeah,
do
or
opera.
it could be classical, right? I mean, if you listen to those like 2 seconds, right, or 2 minutes, or whatever that length of that interlude is, you're like, well, judging by this is that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I've never been too big on, at least at the personal level, I've never been too big on like the labeling of the genres. Like, is this that or that? I'm like, I don't, you tell me what you want to call it. Call it a house, call it a rainbow, call it whatever. It doesn't matter.
Mm.
I know what it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and you see that, I mean, that's not a new concept, but now has become pretty standard, at least. I have a good friend of mine that plays with the San Francisco Symphony, and he was the one that played the principal trombone when they record their album with Metallica.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's great. Is it classical? No. Is it more Metallica than classical? Yeah, I mean, sure. It sounds like Metallica with an orchestra. But, I'm sure that there are people, purists to that particular style, that will be like, oh no, Metallica with symphony orchestra, this is the end of our genre. It's like, I don't think so, but...
I see like some similarities with new metal, especially like 2000 like rap metal, like Rage Against the Machine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Don't disrespect the new metal wave while I'm wearing a Deftone shirt. I feel like it's almost like sacrilege.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was in college, like when I was getting my doctorate, Rage Against the Machine was like everything. Everybody was listening to it. It was like cool.
Mm-hmm.
It was like great. So, definitely. There are definitely bands out there that are innovating and doing different things, like, bands like, for example, Saint Germain from France, that are great at mixing, hip-hop beats and jazz music with live performance and doing all these loops and things like that. So I'm always interested to see what people are coming up with, right? Like, what's new? Right? And the thing is that it's so hard to keep track, because now the way that the music industry has been created, or the music industry has evolved to this point, I mean, we can spend all afternoon here with this computer and look up bands that no one has ever heard of.
Yeah. Not only that, but then not just the people in the industry, but the people who are actively trying to make their way outside of it, which is, I'd argue, probably more people than...
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah, so like...
So it's kind of hard to even keep track of what's going on over there, It's like... right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like a full-time job to be able to try to keep track of all the new bands and the new innovations back in the, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Bands became popular because they had a record, and the record was being played on the radio, right? So there was all these filters that you had to go through, and the music got to us, and you're like, well, I assume this has got to be good. And we listen to it. But now, anybody can put their stuff out there. Everything is available, I mean, for the most part, right?
I mean, anyone can make a YouTube channel and just start...
Oh, absolutely.
So,
Anything is available for anybody to look it up anytime they want.
Yeah.
The availability of music in this day and age is the strongest suit that music has, right?
Yeah.
You think about it before recordings. If you wanted to listen to your favorite piece of music, you had to go to a concert. And that's it. And people listen to their favorite symphony, quote unquote, right? 2 or 3 times in the entire life. When you think about the music industry that way, it's crazy, because now you grab your phone and you can find anything, anywhere, anytime you want, whether it's with, you know, Apple Music or Spotify or YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
Or
SoundCloud.
Bandcamp.
anything, right? I mean, one of my biggest criticism with Apple Music was that their music, their classical music thing was pretty limited. So they just released a new app. Now Apple Music's got the Apple Classical. So now it's like they double down on this, and it's just like, wow, okay. So yeah, but the distribution of music is pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
For better or worse.
Yeah, I'd say on the industry side, probably a little worse because just, you know,
Exploitative a bit.
yeah, just how musicians aren't paid nearly as much as they should be. But then on the more underground and indie side of it, I feel like there's a lot of good coming from it because, you know, it means that if you find someone you like, you can just give them money directly. You can just be like, make more music.
And that was the biggest thing about Napster, right? For example, Napster. When Napster came out, there are bands that became popular just because of Napster, because no one knew who they were, and people started downloading their music all over the world, and they built an audience. They didn't care about getting paid, they didn't care about making money, they just wanted to use the platform to get their names out, which many bands did. That's one example. But bands like Metallica were extremely pissed because they were getting their records ripped and they were not getting any of the royalties from selling the records.
For sure.
So it's almost one of those things that you can't have one and the other. It's like you either open the gates or you don't. Yeah. And I mean, now the gates are open. There's nothing Metallica can do. There's nothing anybody can do, especially with things like torrents, right? You can download any album of any artist anytime, and the artist is not going to make any money.
Well, I think that's another interesting thing about the more, you know, contemporary aspect of it is that a lot of it is based off of like, do you like this artist enough to give them support directly? Because a lot of it is, especially for bands that I listen to, because I listen to a lot of, you know, metal and rock stuff. A lot of them, you know, like I said, Bandcamp, they sell their album directly on a website. They sell merch there too. They, you know, that's where you find their shows. And I think it's nice to see that it pulls a lot of people together with the bands that they really appreciate.
Yeah, and I think after COVID, that's exactly where we are. Like, people, if they care enough to support somebody, they would. If they don't, they don't. Yeah. I went to see the San Francisco Ballet just the other day. They played a new piece by an American composer named Steve Reich, which is not classical, it's minimalist. And they actually released that during the pandemic, and it's a beautiful piece. It's called The Colors of Dance. It's actually very nice. But I care enough to actually go and see it live. I was like, I want to do the concert going experience and see it and support it. And I think that's where it's at these days. People are gonna go and support the artists that they want to support, and for the ones that they don't. But it's kind of like similar to sporting events too, right?
Yeah.
And people, you want to support the Warriors, you go and watch the Warriors.
For sure.
Not that the Warriors need it, like these upcoming indie artists, that they need the money, they need the support, but the concept is,
very
general the same. So.
Well, we should start wrapping this up. We've gotten past the 30-minute mark, which is great. Thank you so much, Zuniga.
Yeah, my pleasure. This has been fun.
Is there anything else you'd like to let the audience know?
Could be events, could be
classes. No, I think you know, just in general, I think is from this fun conversation, I think it's just, I'm always open to hear what people like about music or what they think good music is. It's so different for everybody. You know, you ask somebody in China, mainland China, that never used a cell phone, what they think good music is, and I'm sure you're gonna get an answer that you will never expect. Right? So it's always interesting to see how people see it. And the thing about music is it's very much like food, right? People have their opinions about it, like
For sure.
strong opinions about it. But yeah, it's also very personal too. Like I don't tend not to tell people what they need to listen to or they don't. It's like, yeah, if you want to listen to this, great. If you don't, you don't. Yeah, it's certainly fun to share bands and artists with other people, especially when they are, sharing stuff that you don't know and it's meaningful. I think that's super cool. That's one thing that I do with one of my friends, Dr. Larson. We're always checking in and kind of like, hey, you're gonna like this. You're gonna like this is going something along your in your realm of things you're gonna like. So, yeah.
All right, thank you for listening. We want to shout out Stream Club for possibly, like, what's that? You should join Stream Club. That's a club on campus for music, and we love you, audience, and see you, homies. Bye.
Bye-bye.